We back. What's going on with Josh M. Hicks? I am Drew Stevens. Welcome to a new episode of BULLdozed. We are coming to you about 20 hours or so before the start of NBA free agency. Josh, on Wednesday, the Bulls re-signed Nikola Vucevic to a 3-year, $60 million deal. Today, we learned that Andre Drummond has opted in to his player option for the upcoming season. We also got further detail about Nikola Vucevic in that his 3-year deal is going to consist of him getting $18.5 million in the first season, about 20 in the second season, and I believe about 21 and a half in that third season. So it's more of kind of like an escalating contract. But, we believe that the NBA salary cap is going to rise as well, so it kind of cushions how Nikola Vucevic's contract has been structured. But let me get your thoughts on the two big men and the Bulls running it back with them for this upcoming season, barring any unforeseen moves.
It was expected. We heard from since the end of the season how the Bulls wanted to make sure that it's one of his top priorities was to make sure that Nikola Vucevic came back. Vuce made it clear that he was going to test free agency, but Bulls really had first dibs. So you could tell the relationship was mutual to the point where they was able to get a deal done at this capacity. 3 years, 60 mil, average out about 20 mil a year. Obviously, that's without taxes. But I think I just find it interesting because my initial thought was, okay, Vooch came back. But there's at least one other player that has one more year left on their deal in DeMar DeRozan. And you also got other guys like Alex Caruso who got another year in their deals. What are the Bulls going to do with them? Especially DeMar DeRozan. Because DeMar DeRozan is one of the more focal points of this nucleus that the Bulls created around Zach LaVine. And on top of it, it's not like he's a scrub. The dude was a 2-time All-Star since he's been here. And he's, proven the haters wrong as far as scoring at an eclipse rate within this offensive system and playing next to Zach LaVine. So if you're that hung on keeping this core together, even though, yes, we heard about the Zach LaVine trade rumors and everything, but right now, Bulls are giving us the notion that he's there. He's here for the long term. Let's just say you do keep Zach. You got Vooch for another 3 to 4 years, at least 3 years. Are you going to give DeMar DeRozan a 2-year extension? Are you going to try to keep this core together for those remainder of Vooch's 3 more years, so that way you have a core together that you can build around, and then maybe change other parameters outside of the team? I don't know what the Bulls are going to do. Even though this was expected, I have to wonder what they're going to do with DeMar DeRozan next. Because this is the year you either need to trade him or you're bringing him back before you lose him potentially for nothing. And we already learned how the Bulls are willing to play that fine line with Vucevic. And for them, it worked out. But are they going to do the same thing with DeMar DeRozan? A part of me is thinking, no, they're not. They're kind of selling the idea now that Vooch is here, Zach is here. We might as well keep DeMar too. Especially since between those three, you might get some pretty high value for DeMar DeRozan if you were to trade him even at the trade deadline, considering he's on a friendly contract with 1 year left on his deal. This with the last year of his deal. So it questions the direction of where the Bulls going to go, but it does scream to me from a Vucevic perspective and having him long term with Zach, this core might be here for more than a year. And I don't know if that's what we need at this present moment, unless you are willing to completely revamp the rest of your roster, which so far the Bulls say they're willing to do, but we don't know if that's going to be a clear indication that they will do that. And when you talk about the addition of Andre Drummond, that was a given. But to be honest with you, What were you going to replace him with if he was to go? I don't know the answer to that. To be quite honest with you, I don't know. I don't know if we would be able to fill that position with someone like Andre Drummond, who, yes, he has problems with foul trouble. He has a problem staying consistently on the floor. But the dude is my age. I just turned 29. Like he can play still at a high rate in this league. And on top of it, he's a double-double machine off the bench. That's not even including like him getting starters minutes, but off the bench, he can give you at least 10 and 10 every night. That's something that the Bulls needed. And when they played him correctly in the system like they did this past season, he produced. So I don't know what you're going to replace those guys with, because quite frankly, the market doesn't dictate that you really can replace them right like that. But they re-upped on those guys, and it just shows to me that maybe they really are. They've already been hell-bent on the continuity process. Maybe they may be taking this to an extra level by maybe throwing something under the line with DeMar DeRozan. And if they were to do that, I don't think that's the best move to go, unless they completely revamp the roster. But I know for a fact, Bulls Nation may not be happy about that move.
Yeah, I think the situation with Andre Drummond is it points to the problem with this roster in general. Had he opted out, as it was rumored he was going to do, he was flirting with the Dallas Mavericks, according to Mark Stein.
Right.
That would have given them another, maybe $3.3 million to try to find more shooting or add more shooting to this roster. But as you alluded to, it creates another problem, because who's your backup big man? We know that Billy Donovan likes to run the small ball group with Derrick Jones Jr. heading that lineup up. As of right now, he's not a part of this team. He opted out. You really have no backup big man unless you plan on maybe banking on Julian Phillips making the grade sooner than later and kind of filling into that Derrick Jones Jr. role. I don't really see that. Just that learning curve seems a little bit too steep. It seems like a little bit too much to throw on that young man's shoulders right away. So either way, there was going to be a flip side to whatever Andre Drummond determined to do that was going to, influence what AKME needed to do moving forward. So they're still able to keep their big man, but they have less money to use to find shooters to add to this roster. One other thing that came out of the media availability that AKME had after the NBA draft last Thursday that you and I were a part of, long night. He let us know that he was going to extend qualifying offers to both Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. He followed through with that. Those offers are out there for those two guards that will now make them restricted free agents. So they can still theoretically go out and try to find a better deal, or a deal that they feel suits them and their services or their skill sets better. But like I said, it's going to make them restricted free agents. What are your thoughts on those two being extended qualifying offers? Do you still think that both of those guys wind up back on this roster next season?
It's hard to tell, especially when it comes to Ayo, because as much as Ayo really showed these past 2 years that he's not a second-round pick, he's really a first-rounder, and that he was slept on in this league. He also has some growing pains that led to a point where he's not a fully ready point guard yet to be a starter, and you had to bring in reinforcements. And that's what led to the Bulls bringing in Patrick Beverley, because they knew that point guard position was such a desperate need that Ayo still had to learn it. And the point guard situation is still a question mark. So the Bulls making qualifying offers in a lot of ways protects their assets. It protects what they have. So it makes sense for them to do that. But it shouldn't stop them from being aggressive enough to bringing in someone that can potentially fill those roles better than what they currently have. Granted, yes, players have to develop as well. We know Ayo has developed from year 1 to year 2. We know Kobe White has developed every year since he's been here in Chicago. And he's continuing to develop. But if you don't get a point guard, you're looking at Kobe White as your starting point guard right now. The Bulls have said that they're cool with it, quote unquote, but of course you're gonna be cool with it. That's your player. Like, you're gonna say that. That's good PR. The reality is, at the end of the day, there is still question marks about Kobe White being a starting point guard in this league. And that, combined with the fact that you had Ayo, who was the original starting point guard this past season, and he fluctuated, there's no stability there. So with no stability being in that position, yes, bringing them back, hopefully with improved games and skill sets, benefit the Bulls for sure, especially Kobe White, because you could fluctuate him between the 1 and the 2 and still bring him off the bench, and he still provides the shooting that you are lacking. Yeah. However, your point guard position at the end of the day is not resolved in a way that leads to championship basketball. And that championship basketball is the status. It's the status. You're not reaching that standard at what you currently have in that point guard position. So something has to change. On top of you looking for shooters, on top of looking you for big man depth. There's so many holes in this roster that needs to be fixed that you can't sit here and rely on Kobe White and Ayo to be your top solutions. That's just not the reality. And as great of a player as players as they are, and I know they're going to develop and do well in the league for sure, I don't know if they're prepared for what the Bulls need right now. And because of that, as much as it's great for you to protect their assets, and maybe based on the deals that they do end up getting from other teams, it may be worth matching for sure. But if not, you have to wonder if the Bulls are going to be wise enough to say, you know what, this deal may not be best for us, and we could potentially get better on the market. Let's go out there and get it. Or you sign them, use them as trade bait. I don't know what the situation calls for, but AKME should not be settling for just that. You know, that shouldn't be their only plan. They should be like, okay, that's more like plan B, C, or D. We should be having a plan A that goes further into fulfilling the holes that this team needs. And it's not just with those two players that can fulfill the point guard position. It's so many other layers and so many other holes, so many layers that need to be fixed. We talk about the roster as a whole.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, looking at the way things are shaking out, let's say Kobe White signs on for maybe a little bit more than the mid-level exception, which is $12.4 million. Let's say he signs for $14 million. Let's say Ayo Dosunmu accepts his qualifying offer, which is a little bit more than $5 million. Let's say they waive Carlik Jones and Marko Simonovic, and then you still account for the rookie, Julian Phillips, and maybe they sign Justin Lewis to a veteran minimum. That's 12 spots right there, and you may have just under $12 million to fill out 3 roster spots. Now, at that same press conference last Thursday after the NBA draft, I believe it was the last question that Arturas Karnisovas was asked in reference to Bulls fans seeing who he drafted, what he gave up for Julian Phillips. What was his message for Bulls fans seeing the moves that he's made to this point? And he made the comment that, you know, he thinks that fans should wait until free agency is over and they can take more of a zoomed out look at the moves that he's made or will make this offseason. But given what I just told you, barring any trades, barring any flirtation with the luxury tax, how confident are you that this team is going to be meaningfully different, that they can be better than a 10th seed, better than a below 500 team next season, given the resources they have available and how much of this roster already looks identical or is shaping up to look identical to the one they had last season?
I'm 50-50 on this. I'm 50-50. And this is more on the slightly optimistic side. And the reason why is because when Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley first got here, they drastically changed the roster in a year and a half. They brought in Vooch. They brought in DeMar DeRozan. They brought in Lonzo Ball. They brought in Alex Caruso, Derrick Jones Jr., Javonte Green, and others. They brought so many pieces to this thing that they revamped the whole roster. And for the most part, before Lonzo Ball really got hurt, it worked. So because of that, that's actually a foundational piece that shows what the Bulls really can do when their backs are against the wall. The question that I have for them is, do they really feel they're actually against the wall now? Because if they don't, you're going to see a lot of the same people coming back. But if they do, you may see some drastic change. Now, obviously, the change has to literally come to fruition, which means you're going to have to probably go into luxury tax. You're probably going to have to make some crazy, bold contracts for some shooters. You're going to make some bold moves that we know they are willing and capable of doing. But it depends on how creative they are to make this work. And that's one of the biggest terms that AKME said in at the press conference at the end of the season. You got to be creative. And they have the creative juices to do that because their capitalist specialist and Mr. Polk over there was a genius in making all those other moves work and fit under the salary cap. So they have options to work with, and I think they have the reinforcements and the resources to do it. But it's up to AKME to come up to the table and say, literally at June 30th, yo, let's get this ball rolling. We ain't got time to waste.
They surely don't. They surely don't. The other caveat to that is, there's other teams out there. Everybody wants shooting. Everybody wants big physical wings who can defend. They want backup bigs. What makes the Bulls situation different? Why, if I'm a free agent, even if all I'm looking at is getting a veteran minimum, why am I signing with the Chicago Bulls when I may have opportunity to go to Phoenix and play with Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker? Maybe I'm looking at the Los Angeles Clippers or the Los Angeles Lakers. Teams of that ilk who are really gunning for a championship and putting their money, I guess you could say, where their aspirations are. Why am I going to the Bulls? Sell me, Josh.
It all could be so simple. No, you actually can make a very valid argument based off of these facts. The championship is wide open, especially on the East Coast.
Okay.
You just watch Miami as the 8th seed go from playing tournament to the NBA Finals, which means the Bucks are weak right now. That means Nets are weak. That means Knicks are weak. That means Cavs are weak. That means all the top teams in the East, Sixers, all fair game right now. So there's an opportunity for the Bulls to get into those slots if they make the right moves. And on top of that, improve and the rest of how the East shakes out. But number two, you have arguably two top 20, 25 players in this league. You have Zach LaVine, that's technically considered a top 20 guard, scoring machine. You also have Vucevic, who's arguably a top 10 center in the league, still at this rate. Vucevic is a walking double-double with a three-point jump shot. Zach LaVine can score anywhere on the floor. How do you want it? And make efficient with it. Not to mention, you do have a closer over there as well in DeMar DeRozan. You saw what the team looks like prior to their injuries. And on top of that, which I do think is a very underrated thing as well, you do have a player-friendly coach. Billy Donovan reps for his players. He creates systems for his talent and his players. Players love playing for him, and there's record of that. So you have all-stars on your team that love playing for a player-friendly, offensive-friendly head coach. And if you look at the Bulls, they did make the playoffs, quote-unquote playoffs, past 2 years. There's something that can be said that with those type of talents and the opportunity that's available to them, that might be looking like the best opportunity to take advantage of, especially for homegrown talents like a Fred VanVleet or a Max Strus, who know what it's like to be around that Chicago culture. And, even though they know they've won in other areas and they're doing big things in other areas, if you look at this revamped regime now, you can say something about it. And now, is that the sole purpose as far as what can really draw them there? I don't know. It's gonna be they have to do a lot of convincing. No, let's not get it twisted. But at the same time, if you're telling me, especially from a shooter's perspective and a quality, talented point guard perspective, like the two I just mentioned, you're telling me I get to play with a scoring machine in Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan on the other wing. Both players are going to draw attention. So I have potentially open 3-point shots from that. And you got a dominant big man where if you can't get a shot, you could get the ball to Vooch in the post, and he can still give you 15, 20 a game with 10 plus rebounds. That should scream winning. It should scream winning. So if the Bulls can convince players to do that, you may have a pretty good chance. But the other deal is you got to make sure you're able to spend the bread because they're not coming cheap. And you can't be cheap anymore. Yeah. You're going to have to open that checkbook. And that's what Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley said at the draft press conference, that they got the green light to spend the bread and go into luxury tags. Well, guess what? It's time to put, like you said, the money where their mouth is. You better go over that luxury tax if it means getting some quality shooters and a quality point guard, because those are the biggest holes you need to fill. And that's my pitch to the free agents out there. Please come sign with Chicago if you want to, quote unquote, win with the best friendly options possible.
Hey, I can dig it. You hit the nail on the head, though. That was the two areas that they said they're going to look to address this free agency. Lead guard, with them coming to the realization or just declaring that they don't expect Lonzo Ball to play this season. So they know they have to address the point guard position. And obviously they talked about trying to find some shooting. That's something that Arturas Karnisovas pointed out in the end of season press conference, wanting to change the shooting profile, which we know what it is. They ranked dead last in 3-point attempts the last 2 seasons. I think that DeMar DeRozan being on this team is a big part of that. But also just the fact that they didn't compliment him or Zach LaVine or Nikola Vucevic in the right manner of having guys who can space the floor for them, open up driving lanes for them, be confident enough to actually take the shot when they're given the basketball. Far too many times we've seen a lot of pump fakes, a lot of record scratches, which oftentimes led to something much worse than had they just thrown up a shot. You mentioned Max Strus as one of the potential targets that I'm assuming you'd like to see this front office go after. I'm going to toss a few names out there. You just tell me how you feel about them, okay?
Bet.
A few of them. So, according to Casey Johnson, the Bulls are talking to Patrick Beverley. There's an open dialogue between his representation and the front office about him possibly coming back. We've got Javon Carter, Oak Park, believe Proviso East alum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
We've heard a little smoke about Dante DiVincenzo. He may command, him and Strus may command, close to that mid-level exception. So I'm not sure how much of a real possibility those two guys would be, especially given the fact I just told you what they're working with money-wise. It may be less than that MLE if the Reinsdorfs are not willing to go into the tax. So we got Beverly, Javonte Carter, Dante DiVincenzo, George Niang, Seth Curry, Damian Lee. How you feeling about those names? Are there maybe 2 or 3 that get you excited more so than the other ones?
Anything you just mentioned is better than what we got now. So that works for me. I really like, obviously, Strus for a biased reason. Shout out to the ball. But I really I actually kind of like the idea of a Dante DiVincenzo.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea that, especially when you're talking about maybe as like a backup point guard coming in. I like that idea. Between him and Javon Carter, they get gritty defensively.
Yeah.
And when they get gritty defensively, yes, Javon can shoot the three when necessary, which is what the Bulls really need. Especially with and Devontae DiVincenzo can as well.
Yeah.
But DiVincenzo's a champion. Javon's a champion. They know how to win when they play with the Bucks. You know, they know how to know what it takes to get the job done. And, you know, with their skill sets, the plus that they have for the both of them is that they were starters throughout the seasons, these past couple of seasons in their tenures with previous teams. Now, obviously, Dante DiVincenzo came off the bench behind Steph Curry. That was a given, but he did, you know, help produce in timely fashions for them. He could do the same thing with the Bulls. Javon Carter has shown that he can play point guard in this league. If you put the right people around him, he can get the job done. Why not do it at home when you got Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan on both ends of the floor? Why not? I purposely would like to add a name in here in Jalen Suggs. I think he's going to be available on the market because now the Orlando Magic drafted Anthony Black with their 6th pick. So I think either Cole Anthony or Jalen Suggs is going to be available, and I think the Bulls should look into getting Jalen Suggs as well because same reason. Gritty, defensive perimeter guy that can handle the ball and set up an offense. The Bulls' problem with the point guard position is not necessarily scoring. It's perimeter defense and being able to run a system, which is what Billy Donovan has. You run the system, you're bound to be successful offensively because Zach and DeMar will tear it apart. It's the defensive side of things that go with it. That's what you saw with Patrick Beverley. I'm cool with Patrick Beverley coming back if it's a team-friendly deal. I'm not giving him $18 million. I'm sorry. I know you mentioned Strus is good. Yeah. Gorgon Yang is good from a shooter perspective. He kills us every time he plays the Bulls. Yeah. So the line. So that works too if we can get him. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if we even look at a guy like Caleb Martin from Miami. I honestly think we should look at Gabe Vision too. Anything from Miami that's free, come on over. Like, they've shown that they can win with the right people around them, no matter the situation. Yeah. So, honestly, any of those people can work for me. But I like the fact that I hope they go especially from a point guard perspective. Shooting wise, we need shooters. That's what they need to do is shoot. But from a point guard perspective, you don't have to get a person that can score, although it would be nice. You need someone that can run an offense, score timely, hit timely shots, and it sets the tone defensively from the perimeter. When you get that solidified, that changes everything. And we saw how that looks from the Bulls' perspective when they brought in a Patrick Beverley or a healthy Lonzo Ball. That changes everything, knowing that you got Alex Caruso coming off the bench as well. So those are options that I feel like the Bulls should go after. We know the Bulls have a prototype of player that they like, which is, versatile, long and lengthy, can play multiple positions and defend multiple positions on the court. My ideal typical prototype for the Bulls is a defensive-minded player who can run an offense and hit timely shots, especially from three. And I think that will be the key to success for the Bulls to get back to the playoff picture and prayerfully get past the first round, because we can't go back to the first round and have them be like, well, it's success because last season we played in the play-in. No, you were supposed to go past the first round the first time. Mm-hmm. So let's set that standard and keep that moving. That's another topic for another discussion. But those are the people I would like to have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. Like you said, any of those names are already upgrades, And at this point, you just need upgrades. You need more shooting. You need people like I said that just open up the floor more. You need to be a team who's not going into every game knowing that it's going to have some sort of deficit to make up for from beyond the arc. Like too many times last season, teams were outscoring the Bulls by, 10, 15, 20 points from beyond the arc. And it's just, you dig yourself such a hole when you can't keep up and you can't play the game the way that it's played nowadays. you mentioned that the front office has a type, and I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on the number 35 pick in the draft, Julian Phillips, who the Bulls traded 2 second-round picks for from Washington to select him. From Tennessee, former McDonald's All-American, 6'8", I believe, kind of that wiry frame. Led the combine with a 43-inch vertical, so we know that boy can jump, if nothing else. But he was touted during the press conference for his defensive acumen. AKME talked about him being able to come up right away and just play defense on this level, if nothing else. What are your thoughts on him? What was your initial reaction when you saw that trade went down?
Well, my first thought was, why would we trade 2 2 second rounders for a second rounder? That just never made sense to me. That's the first one. That's the first option. But aside from that, it just screamed what we thought might happen, which was you found Derrick Jones's replacement. Derrick Jones, same type, skinny dude, could jump out the gym, better known for his defense. And he solidifies what Billy Donovan likes: small ball basketball. We thought there was a good chance that could be gone, but the answer is no. It's here to stay. And the best thing, obviously, if he could play, he could fill in right away, like you mentioned. Yes, great defensive mind, defensive acumen, very sensitive around the ball. Great. But the Bulls, like you just mentioned, shot dead last in 3-point attempts for the past 2 seasons. Dead last in 3-point percentage last season. And he only shoots 23% from 3 throughout all he did in college. How does that help the other side of the ball? It doesn't. It honestly can make it a little worse, depending on who you have him out there with. So, I understand why the Bulls made the move. I understand why they felt the need to go into the draft lottery and go into the draft and draft somebody that could fill in a void. But I hope this free agency fills in the void that they need the most. Because if that was the move to do it, you had Amari Bailey on the market, on the draft board. You had Imani Bates on the draft board. You had Isaiah Wong on the draft board. You have players that could put the ball in the basket and shoot the ball in the basket better than what you drafted. So hopefully they fill that void in free agency. But you could technically walk away and be like, this was a typical Bulls move. Like, it gave vibe of like when the Bulls drafted Dalen Terry last year. You didn't pay attention to this guy much. You didn't know who he really was. He fits the type that the Bulls want, which is versatility on both ends of the floor, more specifically the defensive side. He fits what the Bulls were looking for, but not the one that they should be paying attention to the most. So hopefully that will be addressed in free agency from the shooting perspective.
Yeah, one thing I'm wondering about, though, with DJJ gone and Julian Phillips being a very raw rookie, if we see less small ball and more Andre Drummond, if he can stay out of, Billy Donovan's doghouse, we'll see how that goes. I don't know if Billy Donovan has another trick up his sleeve, or maybe he throws Patrick out there as a small ball 5, which I can sort of see. I mean, you never know. Billy Donovan, like you said, loves his small ball lineups, so maybe he just plugs somebody else into that role. But I don't know, man. It's going to be some months before we see this thing kind of come together, where we can really start to kind of pick things apart. But if you guys have sat through this whole episode this long and have not hit us with a like, or you have not subscribed, what y'all doing, man? For real, like, hit us up. Bro. Please subscribe to this channel so you never miss a new episode. Josh and I will be coming back to you guys soon after free agency, which is set to begin Friday at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time, if I'm not mistaken. So, for the Bigs, I'm Drew Stevens. That's Josh M. Hicks. It's us.